Hi, we're Shannon and Jerry Arner.
And our dog, Betty White.
Your hosts of the Arner Adventures podcast.
Could we have named it something more creative? Probably. But it's the name of our blog. It's our last name. We're on an adventure. Yada, yada, yada. After owning our own business, working 24/7.
And don't forget a mental breakdown in between.
We made a lifestyle change and decided to make the most out of life.
We sold our house, most of our belongings, downsized, and moved to the coast.
We live life minimally, but fully.
We live each day as an adventure.
This show will help you learn how to live life more fully, with more intention, by experiencing more, and with less stuff.
We'll talk about our own experiences, interview others who have much to share by creating a spark in our lives.
Some days we'll share real-life ongoings of what we're going through, and others will talk about our favorite flavor of waffle.
Come join our adventure.
It's the Arner Adventures Podcast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Jerry.
Sweet B-Dubs is snoring alongside, so if you hear her, you know it's not us. We're back for episode 67 of the Arner Adventures Podcast.
Today's episode is all about change. We have an expert in change as our spark in our lives guest today.
Before we get to our guest, let's get to our review of the week. Today's review comes from, we think it's Tybee costs 11. I don't know.
Oh, we'll go with it. Tybee says, I listen to this weekly as I drive into work. I have to thank Jerry and Shannon for helping me not to lose my shit in traffic because I began realizing there's so many things to be positive about. And traffic isn't going to take control of me. I highly recommend them.
Wow. Well, Tybee, props to you because traffic drives me nuts too. But, you're right.
And thanks to you for pointing out that traffic should not control us. Spot on with that, Tybee.
Definitely. And we're so thankful that you took the time to give us a review. And if you all who are listening, first of all, thank you for listening, would love to give us a boost of positivity like Tybee did, please give us a 5-star review or rating in the platform that you're listening to us on.
Talk about positivity. Today's guest is Chris Masiello. He wrote a book about how to maneuver change.
Yep, we dig all into that and all things change. But I do want to talk about something a little funny that happened at the end of the episode, right as we're wrapping up. So, you may hear a little bit of it. We're going to see if it's something that can be edited out. So we don't know quite yet, but a fire alarm went off in the building that he's in. So right as we're wrapping up, you may hear some of that. But you know what? We just maneuvered right through that change.
We sure enough did.
Well, should we go ahead and get to Chris?
Let's get to it.
Today's guest is Chris Masiello. Chris is a recognized expert in business and is a personal empowerment speaker. News sources such as ABC affiliates, Wall Street Journal, and others frequently seek Chris's insight, and he has received numerous industry achievements, including recognition as one of the most influential trend-setting leaders in the real estate and home services industries. We're seeking Chris's insight today on a topic that comes up quite a bit here on the Arner Adventures podcast, and that is change. I can't wait to dig into this more, but Chris wrote a book called Change, Short and Simple, Your Guide to Personal Transformation. Let's just go ahead and dig in. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Shannon, it's great to be with you and your community, so thank you so much.
So we like to get a mental picture so that we can kind of understand where are you coming to us from today?
So I live in New Hampshire, and I also am fortunate enough to have a home in Naples, Florida. So I'm in Naples today. So, and my compatriots up in New Hampshire are getting a lot of snow. So
yeah, I was going to say they're really jealous of you right now.
Yeah, I'm sending them a lot of warm thoughts.
Right. Even though I'm sitting here on the water, I'm still very jealous about the temperatures you have right now. Mm-hmm. Speaking of nice changes, I want to get into this whole conversation. Gosh, as I was sort of going through all of the things that you specialize in and your book, I feel like there's not anyone who's listening to this who cannot relate to what's going on as far as this topic. People want to be in the norm. And we talk about that a lot on this show, is that sure. The norm, and I'm using my finger quotes, is something that I personally, and a lot of our guests don't particularly want to be. They want to set sort of a course for themselves that veers off from the norm, and who defines what sure. norm is. But I think it's part of lessons that we go through where we want to feel like we're in the norm and do what is expected of us. So why, first of all, the first question is, why do you think that is? Why do you think people want to feel that they're normal?
Well, I don't think life as an adult is a whole lot different than life as a child. So, it's basically peer pressure, and then wanting to fit in, and if you use kind of your group of friends, let's say, and you're breaking out of the cycle of the norm for your group of friends, it's just human nature to um, for them to try to pull you back in, right? That creates that discomfort for you. And I always think it's more interesting too about the fact that if you're out doing something different than the norm, either the larger norm or the norm within your social setting, it's not really what you're doing that will trouble people. It's how it reflects on them. It's the mirror. I think everything is a mirror. So I just use this example. I actually use this example in a book. Let's say that you've got a group of friends and you want to go do yoga, and nobody in the group does yoga. Well, you might be subject to criticism for that because you want a different lifestyle. You want to be more mindful. You want to be more calm. You want to be in shape. All these different things. But yet, if you're in a social setting or a social group where that's not a priority, no judgment, it's just not a priority. Then that's and if there's some discomfort within your group about that, it's not really what you're doing that's the problem. It's really how it reflects on them and how it makes them feel. I think if we can keep that in mind as we're moving through change, a lot of times, people will look at other people who, as you say, are kind of out of the norm, and they're a little envious, but they don't know how to get there themselves. And so the natural inclination is to apply peer pressure. So.
It's really interesting that you say that. We had a discussion last year with someone who had made big lifestyle changes. And we were telling him about how, when we made our lifestyle change, of course, we were not the norm. We had to do it, for our health, mental health, physical health. But we had a conversation with someone who was really downing it. And we were talking about that. And I said, really didn't have anything to do with him. Like, why? I wonder why he was acting that way. And this person said, a lot of times people, exactly like you said, they look at it and they say, well, yeah, that change might not be for me, but I am envious of the fact that they can go through that change and I can't go through that. So that's spot on with what we've heard from other people. So it's interesting as far as feeling like you're included or any of that.
Yeah. And the other thing, Shannon, too, is that it's self-limiting beliefs. And at some level, we all have them. But we can get into this a little later. But self-limiting beliefs are just that. They're in almost all cases. There are a few, probably, maybe not, but most. Let's just say, for discussion's sake, and really in all cases, they're ours. We own them. We created them.
Right.
Which also means that we can disperse them too. We don't have to own them for life.
Definitely. Have you sort of had the mindset that is reflected in what you talk about now forever? Did you go through some challenges that made you focus in on change specifically? Like, how did you get to where you are, an inspirational person to talk about change and helping people through that?
Well, thank you for that. I think, yes, I think I've always had it. I grew up in a very dynamic household. My parents, were amazing, gave us, not perfect by any stretch. I was an athlete, still am. And kind of grew up in an entrepreneurial family where self-limiting beliefs, of course, they're there anyways. We all have them, but they weren't prevalent, and anything was achievable. So I think from that point of view, I probably have a natural inclination. But like everybody, I've had my dark moments of the soul. I mean, everybody has them, and we have them for a reason. They're very instructive if we can embrace them. But every time you go through kind of a growth spurt, I always think growth is so fascinating personally, because if if you take an example of a jet, right, that's getting ready to break the sound barrier is 762 miles an hour. So as the airframe is approaching breaking the sound barrier, you've got pressure that builds up on the leading edges of the wings and all that, and it makes the plane gyrate and buffer and do all sorts of things. But once you punch through, it's smooth air. That's where you get the sonic boom. It's the release of the pressure against the plane. But once you break through, it's pretty smooth sailing until you have to do it again.
Right.
And so I think, as we're approaching changes in events in our lives, it can get a little bumpy, but we have to stay the course and know that it's just a moment in time and it will pass, just like when the aircraft, passes through the sound barrier.
Right. I heard something recently where someone was describing tough times in life, and you could say with change too, with the plane, and they were talking about how it's really cloudy, and then you get above the clouds, and then there's the sun.
Get above the clouds.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Liquid IV.
We've been using Liquid IV now for over a year, and what a game changer.
It is, especially if you don't feel like you're getting enough water in each day. Liquid IV is a hydration multiplier.
It's a powder in a packet with so many flavor options. Pina colada and the strawberry are probably our faves year-round. You can take them wherever you go. Or like you do, Jer, you make a big water pitcher every day and drop some packets in that pitcher and mix it up, right?
Right you are. Yep, I want my water to work for me. Liquid IV delivers 2 to 2.5 times more hydration than if I were to drink the water by itself.
Head over to arneradventures.com/liquid-IV to grab our discount code and get free shipping.
That's arneradventures.com/liquid-IV.
And now back to the show. Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about the book. The book, like we talked about, is called Change, Short and Simple, which I think when you think about change, it's not short and simple, but I guess it really is. But you help, so you help guide readers through navigating change, transforming their personal lives and their careers. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, thank you for asking that. So I'm an amateur historian, and I've been fascinated with history my whole life, ever since a little kid. I had a my great grandmother had lived in New York City and kind of traveled in the social circle, with with folks who unfortunately perished on the Titanic. So I had this, like, from a really young age, this fascination with history. But the more, if you understand, as you get older, you understand about history, which is true about life, is that it's always about change. And so wherever we have gotten to, and wherever we're going to go, all involves change. There's no way of avoiding it. And so my interest in history has helped me a lot in business and in personal coaching. In understanding that we're going through phases, and anytime there's something new, it can be judged, right? If you take a look at the transition from horses to cars, right, and heavier than air flight, you just take a look at different things, right, and to computers, and how there's always resistance to new things, but as that new thing becomes more the norm, it becomes more accepted. That's that part of assimilating change into the process. And so I think it's been a combination of what I've learned. I've had an amazing career, which is still thriving, and I'm so thrilled with the number of people that I've got to work with, and I get to, that they've taught me so much. And so really everything I have is really more of a compilation of what either I've learned or what other people have taught me in working with them. And I'm a big believer too, in that when you have the opportunity to work with somebody else, it's an opportunity to work on yourself. And so if I kind of merge together, the appreciation of history and the understanding of it, of how history, transcends events, and the resistance that happens through it, and then the opportunity to work with so many fine people, putting those together it was really kind of the formation of the book.
So with that being said, people who learn from history learn not to repeat certain things. Do you think that, is there a certain personality type of the people that you work with who do not like change? Do you find that, I mean, I feel like my assumption is that most people don't like change. And it might be something with my personality that I want new things. Like I want new experiences. No, if someone tells me something's changing, yeah, there's some stress with it. Like, oh, I gotta learn something new, but I like when things are changing. I'm the person who changes my living room around, every few months.
Sure.
So are there certain personality types that are like that, or what makes someone welcome change, whereas another person, detests it?
Well, I think we all come here. We all come here with certain proclivities. So we all come by our resistance to change pretty naturally. Some more than others, of course, as you point out. But generally, I think we're all kind of, we all come here kind of pre-programmed to be weary of change, and simply because we're, as a species. So this is kind of what I tell everybody. So as like, if you don't like change, don't worry about it, because you're like an amazingly good company. And right, I mean, I don't know, there's 8 billion of us now, and I don't know how many billions there were before that, but you're in like super good company.
Sure.
So we all come by this just naturally, because as a species we are wired for survival. That's how we got here. And so in a historical sense, that when something changed in our environment, when our environment was more treacherous, right, our external environment was more treacherous, when something changed, it typically signified danger first. Then your fight, flight, or freeze instincts kick in, and so we're all kind of wired that way. I think how we start to dismantle that, though, is to understand, okay, well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm as easily adaptable to change as the next person. I come by this naturally. We don't have the same type of environmental hazards that we had 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Pick a time frame. And so instead of following our predisposed wiring to scan for threats first, opportunity second, we now as a species have the opportunity to scan for opportunity first, threat second. And that's a mind shift. That's a change, but it's a thing. And
right.
And right. So we really are predisposed to it. It's all about rewiring your system, Shannon. We all talk about how to rewire the brain. We just have to be patient enough to do that.
And I would imagine being comfortable with the way things are is also a protective, way of dealing with things. Yeah, I don't want this change because then I'm going to have to adapt to, or is it as safe as this is here? That's how.
Well, I'm kind of an advocate of the status quo is not safe. If it might feel safe, and we can all understand why. But like you changing around your living room,
yeah,
I do the same thing, by the way. So, and I grew up. My mother is an interior designer, so I kind of have it in my system.
Okay.
But I would actually advocate that the status quo is not safe. Now, there's this, and for the simple reason is that there's all sorts of stuff going on around you. So while you think nothing's changing, everything is changing.
Right.
Like no one escapes that. And so I think if we stay in the status quo too long, and we stay in our comfort zone too long, then at some point you're going to have to play catch up, because you haven't been making the incremental changes along the way to kind of keep up. And I've adopted this term called the creep of change. Things kind of like just creep up on you. And so, if you're in the status quo for too long, or you're not really paying attention to what's going on around you, change creeps up on you. And then all of a sudden, like you're caught really off guard, because now instead of a little bit of change all at once, all of a sudden it's a lot of change.
Like it's starting to make me think bigger, like societal changes, and people who don't adapt to the way that people change, or the way the environment changes, or anything. This could go huge.
Right. Well, so think about this for a minute. So we have that's the societal piece is great. That's such a good ad. So think about the whole wanting to work at home movement. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the movement of finding new jobs and this and that. Well, so out of the pandemic, people got used to working at home, but I'm more of the mindset of that. It's not that people don't want to work in the office because we're pack animals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's we're wired as pack animals. Otherwise, we wouldn't have cities and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be around other people, right? For all sorts of reasons. Social, energetic. You pick any number. But I think, like at a business level, what's been missing is that it's not that people don't want to go back to work. It's not that they don't want to go back into the office. There might be some of that, of course, but predominantly. But what they're really saying is that they want to be in an environment. They don't want to go back to the office environment that they had pre-COVID because they got a little bit of time to be away from it and they realized how dysfunctional it is. And really, what they're saying is that I want to be in an environment where my voice matters, where I have more input, where I can feel really more at a heart-based level that I'm contributing. I'm not just a number. And so that's a place I think where, society or business has been very slow to pick up on the fact that hiatus from being in the office gave people the opportunity to step back and say, hey, whoa, I don't want to go back into that toxic environment. So
Right.
I think that the societal piece, it's a great that's a great ad.
So I'm thinking about, shortly when things opened back up, I was in a cab or an Uber or something in New York. And it was when they did their whole, oh, we're back
Oh
open,
yeah,
everybody come visit.
yeah.
But it was still, you had to show your vaccination card to go in a
I know.
restaurant, you still had to wear your mask, all
I
that
know.
stuff. I was in this cab and we were talking about, hey, have you seen, things change because of the pandemic as far as coming back to normal, all of that. And he was saying, yeah, I think that just the whole conversation about people and how people adapted and all of that. And he said, yeah, we came back together as a city. And it reminded me of, around 9/11 and how we all just kind of came together. And he said, but I fear that enough time is going to go by and everybody's going to revert back to the way it was. And they're going to forget that this whole big change should have made us stay more together and all of that. So I have been back a couple of times since, and I asked, the cab drivers, whatever, have you noticed, blah, blah, blah. And all my experiences this last time was like, yeah, it's back to the way it was.
This episode is brought to you by Base.
Listen, if there's one thing that bugs us to no end, it is traveling with someone who checks their luggage.
What a waste of time and money. First, you should just take less and you can grab our travel prep list at arneradventures.com to pack smarter.
But one of the best resources we use is our Base carry-on rollers, which allow us to carry everything we need. And since it's the carry-on size, you don't have to check it.
I think the most common questions we get from people is how we avoid checking our luggage. And we always say, pack smarter and Base.
Head over to arneradventures.com/base. That's BEIS to grab the link to save $15 off of your first purchase.
You're not going to regret this purchase. Our family and friends and anyone who travels with us now has Base luggage.
Really, because they got tired of me complaining about them wasting my time.
That is arneradventures.com/base to grab the link there. It's also in the show notes.
Happy travels. And now back to the show. So I'm curious what your opinion is on that. Do you, and I'm not picking on New York, I'm talking about anyone with any kind of a big change. Do you think that people welcome it and it seems so warm and fuzzy on a societal stance, and then people are just like, oh, okay, I'm just whatever. Like, why do you think that is, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I was just in New York City. I was just in there a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I did notice is the restaurants close at like 10:30 now, which I thought was kind of fun.
That's true. That's a change. That's true.
Yeah, that's a change. Yeah. I think it's just, again, I think it's our wiring to go back to what we know. And because maybe it was safe, I always think that's an interesting an interesting conversation about going back to what you know. I mean, that's very common, that people will go back to what they know because it feels safe to them. I always think diets are funny because okay, I'm going to go on a diet, and I don't know, pick 60 days, and I'm going to lose this much weight, and I'm going to have this type of discipline for my for my food intake, right? And I'm going to have this exercise and all this other stuff. Well, and then when the diet's over, what do a lot of people do? Well, they go back to what they knew.
Right, revert back to what they knew. Yeah.
That's not the point of it. The point of it is not to go back. The point of it is to continue with a different lifestyle. And so, I think it gets down a lot to who's committed to a different lifestyle. And you take a place like New York, and I know we're not picking on New York City. You take a place like that, it has a specific energy around it, and that's probably hard to move, institutionally, going back to what they know.
Also, not to completely down this, but I'm thinking about when people are in a bad relationship or an abusive relationship.
No doubt.
And it's sort of like, the devil I know, I would rather stay here than change.
There's this condition called loss aversion. And loss aversion is basically the inclination to stay in the status quo, because exactly what you just said, Shannon, is that, well, this is what I know. And what I know is safer than, the space that I'm in today that I know feels safer than going to new space. Now that's just a mindset. And so, as you pointed out, staying in jobs, relationships, circumstances that don't serve, but it's what you're used to. It's a little bit like terminal velocity. If you can break out of orbit, that's where all the really cool stuff lives. And
right.
You have to find the courage to do that.
What about people who are in change that they have no control over, whether it's societal, whether it's family, whatever it is, it's a change that they have no control over. They have no choice. What advice do you have for people who want to be able to navigate that in a positive way and maybe find that they're even welcoming it? Like, is there a tip or something you can tell them?
Yeah, I certainly, from my experiences, and just getting back to our last topic, with people staying in the condition that they're in that might not be optimal, is to really appreciate the fact that all the new good stuff lives in the space that you haven't been in yet. So you have to move into that space.
That's so true.
Because really not much is going to happen in the space you currently know. It's already defined. So to find that new, juicy part of life that I'm looking for, where am I going to go? I have to go find that blank chalkboard or that blank space and go there. And that's where I'm going to create it. I'm not going to create it necessarily, almost hardly ever, in the space that I currently know.
So, that's what life's about. Experiencing new things. So is that what you think people should do? Like, say, okay, this is going to be an adventure. Just working on changing that mindset. I mean, I'm guessing there's not some easy, just click, key turn.
In general terms, let's just say it takes 6 weeks to either form a habit or to dissolve a habit, right? Because it requires every time we have a habit, I talk with my hands, for instance, or it could be food, or it could be, relationship, or it could be exercise, it could be sleep, it could be discipline for work, with any number of things. They're all synaptic connections, which we build over a period of time. So that's how we wire our brain. It's our neurons. It's how they wire. And the more we do one thing, the more that the stronger our synaptic connections get, our neural net, right? It becomes stronger and stronger. So, and if you think about it in terms of the average person has 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them are the same as the day before. So we're naturally doing a lot of reinforcement. And I think almost every day, all of us, And so you can't monitor 60,000 thoughts a day, but what you can monitor are the thoughts that are important to you for the things you want to change. And so that's why we have to kind of be patient with ourselves and understand that if I really want change, I'm going to have to be patient, and it might take me 6 weeks
Mm-hmm.
or 8 weeks or 3 weeks, and depending on what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And be patient with yourself and don't give up. You know, one strategy that I've developed is keep a calendar. You know, if you think it's going to take you 60 days to change, well, then mark off one day at a time, because then you'll see that you're getting closer and closer and closer to that point, you know, so that you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like you're on this like endless ride that like, when does this end, you know? And
Right.
you might need to extend the calendar or shorten the calendar, but at least give yourself, you know, a measure. So,
That documentation, especially if you're
yeah,
visual, which a lot of people are, to be able to see that. It's sort of like
exactly.
when you see a photo, you know, from years ago, whether it's, I mean, everyone changes age, but if it's, you know, a lifestyle change and you say, wow, I look and feel so much better now that I've made that change. Or if it's you know, something in your home or whatever it is, like you're renovating your home and you have a picture before, a picture after, it's so much more monumental than the stages when you're living it, you know.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why there are before and afters of
That's
physical
why, right?
transformations.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I was sort of preparing to talk to you, I was thinking about how there are stages of grieving and how
Mm.
a lot of people believe that you go through all of these stages before you start to really, well, I guess it's a way of healing, but since a lot of people look at change in a negative way, I thought, well, I wonder if, you know, when someone has a change that was not welcome, they did not invite that in and they do not want it. Do you think that, you know, there are stages, or do you, when they don't welcome it, do you think there are stages of that,
Mm.
or, you know, challenges that you have to overcome before you start, you know, your mindset starts changing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. So I would advocate that control truly is an illusion. I think it's just easier if we accept that. Now,
Okay.
there are certain things we can control. We can control, you know, our things like diet and a little bit, you know, and our environmentals and things like that. So yes, we have control over the things maybe in close proximity to us, but in a larger sense, um, you know, there's some things that are just going to be out of our control. And
Mm.
and just accepting that there will be some things, um, and they could be big things that are out of our control. I think it's healthier than stressing about how do I control everything. Because you know, when we try to control everything, Shannon, our world gets small.
Yeah.
It gets
You're
smaller
saying
and
this to a
smaller and
control
smaller.
freak. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a
Well,
complete control freak. And I
well,
agree. I
yeah,
stress out more when
yeah,
the things don't go my way, which is
yeah.
a whole change
Right,
thing.
right.
Yeah.
But if we think about it in terms of if we think about it in terms of sure, we have control over certain things. Okay, our physicality and you know all the, you know, diet and how we interact with people and, you know, things like that. So we do have control over some things, but if we try to control too much, like I just said, our world gets small. But here's actually what we have control of all the time, regardless of what the circumstances. It's how we interact with the change.
This episode is brought to you by Southern Oak Artisan.
Southern Oak Artisan makes 100% natural soy candles that are not only aesthetically pleasing but are safe to breathe, since they are made with non-toxic ingredients and they're not overwhelming like other candles you may be used to.
Between morning brew, lemon bake, lavender, there's just so many scents to choose from.
Southern Oak Artisan 100% natural soy candles are handmade in our home state here in North Carolina, but lucky you, they ship all over the U.S.
Yes, lucky indeed. Head over to arnerventures.com/Southern Oak Artisan, where you can grab our discount code and link to save on your soy candle purchase.
That's arnerventures.com/Southern Oak Artisan. It's also in the show notes.
And now back to the show.
We are 110% in control of how we react and how we interact with whatever that change may be.
Mm.
That's the ultimate. So getting back to your desire for control.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we control. We control how we interact with the event. We don't
Yeah.
control the event. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Many events we can't control, but what we always control is how we interact with it. We are not victims.
Yeah.
And change creates opportunity. It's again scanning for opportunity versus scanning for threats. So
Mm.
I, and I, yeah. So I'm a big believer in that things are just going to happen. And
Yeah.
okay, fine, let them happen. Now, where's the opportunity for me in this?
I just wrote that down because I feel like one of the ways I control things is looking at a situation and saying, what's the worst that's going to happen? What is the worst thing that can happen? So I can go ahead and be prepared for that, which is totally not, I know it's not the way that I should go into things. It should be more of a positive mindset, but I love scanning for opportunities.
Yeah.
And what's the opportunity for me in this challenging situation?
Yeah. Well, you do have to. I mean, look, we can't be too Pollyannish about it. We do have to backstop against things not going well. So I'm not saying that all we do is scan for opportunities, and it's a Willy Wonka movie. But it is about So we do have to be aware of backstopping things, but they can't be the primary focus because where our thoughts go, right, energy flows, and so if we're on the threat side, we're going to get more threats. If we're on the opportunity side, we're going to get more opportunity. And that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's people can say, "Oh, energy this and woo woo that," and it's like, well, okay, but it's pretty much proven it's a thing.
Yeah.
The law of attraction is a thing.
Yeah.
And it comes in all sorts of different forms. It means different things to different people and different traditions. But if we take personal responsibility for how we interact with an event, that's the ultimate control.
Do you find that more people, either you work with one-on-one or people that you talk to who get your book, which everybody needs because we all go through change, do you find that most of the people who are seeking that help are people who are going through a negative, what they perceive as a negative change in their life? Or do you think it's just sort of like, okay, it's personal growth. I'm guessing it's a mixture of both. We all need to be, like you said, growing and learning more. But do you find that people seek your advice when they are in a sort of a negative, challenging change?
I think it is more that, unfortunately. And I think one of the themes, in what I do is to try to get people to not wait until some event that has triggered you where now you've got to make massive change.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think again, as a species, and it's an odd juxtaposition because as a species we resist change, but yet the one thing the species has been able to do better than any other one is adjust to change. It's so fascinating to me if you think about it in terms like that. And so I do think that there's a leaning towards having some type of negative event in life, which then gets you to then kind of forces you. I think about it in terms like this: if you spend too much time in your comfort zone, okay, you will be chased out of that. So you can either like move out voluntarily if you over time, or at some point, if you spend too much time in your comfort zone, you will be chased out of it.
Right.
That is a guarantee. And then that's what creates, those negative events that build up a lot of pressure on you, and then people have to then kind of perform at an extraordinary level, which is hard.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, I think so.
That makes sense. It would bubble until it is that big unwelcome change that they don't want to deal with, and it was happening the whole time.
Yeah. Well, think about health. I always think health is a really good example, right? So, if you take care of yourself a little bit every day, just a little bit, okay, then, odds are very good you're going to be healthy longer. But if you don't take care of yourself and you kind of abuse yourself a little bit every day, okay, well, the same thing accumulates until all of a sudden, wait a minute, I've got a disease.
Mm-hmm.
And, or, I've got an illness, I got high blood pressure, I got diabetes, whatever the case may be. And so now all of a sudden I have to take radical measures.
Yeah.
I have to go on a, prescription, or, I might something even more, more intense than that. And so it's doing a little bit. I always call it doing the work.
Yeah.
If we just do the work a little bit every day, then we're building up that reservoir of energy and mental health, physical health, emotional health, where we're really less likely to be preyed upon by circumstance.
What techniques do you use on a daily basis or a regular basis to help yourself deal with change, and how can we implement those?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, look, I'm not any different than anybody else,
right?
So I've been fortunate to have a lot of experiences, which is really what I try to convey in my work and my writings. I think for me, what's always helped me is stay in curiosity, because when you're curious, you're not in judgment. And when we move, and I think that's what happens when there's a lot of change, we immediately move to judgment. I say, we, fellow 8 billion of us, we immediately move into judgment. But see, once I start judging something, once I judge, I have closed out all other opportunities, because you can't be in curiosity and in judgment at the same time. So if I'm curious about how an event maybe that I didn't sponsor, but, it's just been laid on me, here's a thing that's changing. And if I'm curious about it, then I'm going to have multiple timelines of events possibly spur out of this event. But if I judge it as being bad, an immediate rush to judgment, there are no timelines for any positive outcome.
Oh.
Because I've already decisioned it.
Yeah.
I've decisioned this to have no opportunity whatsoever. And so for me, I actually just had one of those myself, actually. And it was kind of a moment for me. It was just the summer, it was kind of a moment for me. And I remember thinking to myself, almost in the same breath, I was like, oh, really? And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm like, right, what a huge opportunity. And and I was like, right, that's the reason why I'm here right now is because of the opportunity. And how one door closes and one opens. I was in one of those closing and opening,
Okay.
events.
Yeah.
And so I think living in curiosity, just be curious. You don't need the answer right now. I mean, that's the other thing. You don't need the answer right now, because we get so much security out of wanting the answer. It's like, you don't need the answer right now. It'll come to you. Don't worry about it. It'll arrive if you're curious. So stay in curiosity and don't rush to judgment.
It's sort of like traveling. We always say you should travel and you should be curious about other cultures, and it does open you up to where you're not judgmental about people who are different than you. So it's very similar to what you're saying. Huh.
Yeah. I think that's staying and living in curiosity. Will open doors for you that you'll be really pleasantly surprised at.
Well, I think we should get to your fast 5 questions. So the number 1 is arrive early or fashionably late?
Early.
Yeah. I sort of figured it would be that way with you. I don't know why, but I'm the same way.
It's hard to do, but I would say early.
Yeah.
I try to be early.
Yeah. Okay, number 2, sunrise or sunset?
Oh, both. I love both.
I do too.
So I hope that's
I
okay.
lean towards
I love both.
sunrise because I feel like it's a fresh start. Probably change. It's a fresh start, but I guess you could say that about the sunset as well.
If I had to pick one, I will say sunrise.
And number 3, passenger or driver?
I don't mind being a passenger.
Okay. Number 4, city or countryside?
Country.
When you first said that, I was thinking, I wonder if when I get to number 4, I should say Florida or New Hampshire.
Right. Well, I know Florida.
I know.
I enjoy nature.
Yeah.
I actually, in New Hampshire, I live in the country, and I'm very blessed where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've studied animal totems for years, and so being with, in nature and watching the wildlife and all that is kind of a pastime of mine. So
I'm going to completely put this out there because I was very ignorant before, but when I went to Alaska, I was in Ketchikan and went on one of those totem tours, and the stories that come behind it, I had no idea. I was just like, yeah, okay, they're sort of decorative, and I'm sure they have something to do with whatever, but I had no idea the depth that those totems have. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great book, if you're looking, by Ted Andrews, called Animal Speak. It's like an encyclopedia of animal totems. It's great.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting that came up. Okay, number 5. Jerry swears this is the best way to get to know anyone, is ketchup or mustard?
Ketchup.
Ketchup. Okay.
I actually don't really eat meat, so
we don't either.
We don't remember.
Yeah, we don't eat meat either, but if we're eating a veggie dog or something, that's sort of when we would do one or the other. Yeah. And the question that we ask everyone is, what does a life well lived mean to you?
I think it can mean a lot of things. I think generally for me is I kind of define my days and my interactions with people as leaving whatever circumstance I've had better than the way I found it.
Yeah, that's a really great way of approaching every day. Yeah,
it could be and it doesn't need to be big. As a matter of fact, most of the time it's not. It's just little things, but leaving things better than the way you found it.
That's so nice. Yeah, but I do want to ask if you could tell our audience where they can find you and how they can get your book, and we're going to link it in the show notes.
You just go to chrismasiello.com.
Okay. How great was that?
That was wonderful. Yeah,
I feel like so often I think we'll be talking about this in the episode. Most people look at change as a negative, right?
Typically, yeah. I think everybody's somewhat intimidated by it. And that's everybody. Yeah.
So I remember when we saw that, he had this book, and we were like, okay, he should definitely be on the podcast. I was thinking, ooh, I think that this might be a difficult conversation, but it wasn't. It was, I love someone who makes me think about something in a different way. We talk about mindset a lot, but I loved how he made me feel like, you don't think about how much control you have about change until you have a conversation with an expert in change that makes you realize that you do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. I think it's one of those things we all kind of just roll with, like, oh, it's a fact of life. And you're right. We're not going to break it down and try to analyze it. We just got to roll with it. It's like, turn and face the strange changes.
Okay. Yeah. Is that David Bowie?
Yeah, that was.
Okay.
That's appropriate.
Yeah. I mean, look, we don't have control over the fact that it's going to happen most of the time, but when it does happen, we can control the way that we react to it.
He really made some good points that made me want to look at change as just new opportunities. And I like the outlook on that.
Yeah.
If this episode resonated with you, or if you know of someone who would benefit from anything we talked about today, or any episode, our guests, or anything, please share it with a friend. It's a great way of supporting the podcast and us, and we really appreciate it.
Another way of supporting the pod is by leaving us a 5-star review rating on the platform you're listening to us on. Oh, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button because that also supports us. We would love that.
You can always find us, links we refer to during the show, and any of the podcast sponsors at arneradventures.com or linked here in these show notes. And until next time, enjoy that journey you're on. We're wishing you lots of adventures.
Adios.
Arrivederci.
Au revoir.
Adios.
Sayonara.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Dos vidaniana.
And